This is the Nonprofit Infrastructure Grant Program, which is pretty exciting. So this is a DOLA administered fund. So this is federal funding, everybody, that we are going to be your wrap for. So to get us started, today's agenda, we do have a lot on the agenda. We've got a lot going on. This is kind of a first time unforeseen funding. So if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to ask during this webinar. We will make sure to get through those. So introductions, my name is Courtney Seder. I'm the Director of Finance and Administration here at United Way of Pueblo County. I will be your primary contact. Diego Rivera will be your secondary contact for any technical assistance here at United Way. He's our executive administrative assistant. So background on this funding. So Colorado House Bill was signed into law June 3rd of 2022. It created small community-based nonprofit infrastructure program. The initiative invested dollars from the American Rescue Act of 2021 by providing grants to small community-based nonprofit organizations for infrastructure to help mitigate the financial hardships of COVID-19 public health emergency. This program is administered by Colorado Department of Local Affairs. You'll hear me say DOLA a lot, in cooperation with 8 regional access partners. That is United Way of Pueblo County. We are one of them. United Way of Pueblo County is the wrap for 5 counties: Chaffee, Custer, Fremont, Huerfano, and Pueblo. If you are from a different county other than one of these 5 listed here, you are on the wrong webinar. However, you're more than welcome to sit in. All of us wraps are working together as a collective for this funding. So we are all sharing the same information, and then message me afterwards and I can connect you with the appropriate wrap for your region. All funds must be awarded by December of 2024 and expended by December 30th of 2026. The maximum grant award to a small community-based nonprofit is no more than 30% of your annual operating budget that is submitted, or up to 100,000, whichever is less. So I'm getting a lot of questions on that. We'll talk more about that as we keep going on. One of the other things I would like to encourage everybody is that the full House bill is on DOLA's website. It has a lot of really helpful information and verbiage on there for your narratives. So that will give you some verbiage that'll help you stay in line with the funding focuses. So your wrap team is myself and Diego, like I mentioned. You can reach us at a specific email. That's at grants@pueblounitedway.org. That's going to be your best email for anything related to this funding source. Timeline. So we are through step 1. July 5th through August 31st, applications are open. Okay. You can apply through the online portal on our website. That's at I'll share it at the end. It's got NPI. You'll see it says apply now. We are using SurveyMonkey Apply. It's a new portal for us. It's great. It walks you through step by step. It shows you where to make attachments, all of those things. You will have to create an account. So if you have any questions on how to make that account, you're having any issues adding any collaborators, anything like that, please reach out to myself or Diego. Again, we have a lot of technical assistance to provide you guys because this is a new platform and a lot of you will be new users. So please do not hesitate. And going on with the timeline, once applications closed, there will not be any accepting of any late applications. We will then go into a review session where the wraps will each have committees reviewing the grants based off the scoring rubrics. Those reviews go from September to November. We then send our recommendations to DOLA within that time period for DOLA's final approval. Once DOLA has the final approval, we will send out notice of awards between December and January. And the first issuing of payments, once contracts are completed, is anticipated as early as January 2024, as long as contracts are completed. And then all funds for the awards must be spent by December 30th, 2026. Any questions? No? All right, organization and service area criteria. So it is important to know that this criteria is set directly from the House bill. It is not negotiable. So if you have any questions regarding these pieces, and please reach out so we can discuss your individual situations, because some of these health and equity, other community needs as identified, people might not be sure if their programs are fitting within that. So track record of so these to the left is where we're describing what your nonprofit must fit within these things. So you have to have a track record of providing effective, culturally appropriate, and relevant programs and services to communities underrepresented, underserved, or under-resourced in Colorado. Those terms are specifically listed in the House bill. That is the focus populations of this program. The majority of board and staff represent the community you serve. Community feedback is incorporated into the design of your programs. Your main office is located in the community you serve. You are in good standing with the Colorado Secretary of State. And you have an annual budget of $150,000, but not more than $2 million. So when we're talking about budget, the budget you'll be submitting is your current fiscal budget, your board approved current fiscal budget. I know some of us are getting ready to have new budgets approved. It's your current operating fiscal budget. So we're in July. United Way runs on a July to June fiscal budget. I would be submitting this budget right now. Eligible service areas. So health equity, workforce development, community economic development, early childhood care, education support, housing, food justice, and other community identified needs. So this is in a sense like a catch-all, where if you have a community, because they have this category recognizing that not every community in the entire state has the same needs. So if your community has identified that there is a need for something that's not within these categories, and it's in your strategic plan, it's in your city's strategic plan, it's in your county's strategic plan, you can use that as backup to say this is a community identified need that doesn't fit within these categories, but is eligible and for this funding. Categories of funding: data technology, data collection, and or technical technology infrastructure, professional development, communications, strategic planning and organizational development for capacity building, fundraising and other services, and existing program expansion, development, or evaluation. So the biggest takeaway here that I think it really helps when you're in your narrative of what your project is for, is to make sure that your categories support infrastructure and capacity building. So whatever categories you're selecting, make sure that it shows supporting infrastructure and capacity building, because that's the focus of the whole grant project. You cannot start a new program or a new project with this funding, but you can expand on a program or a project. That does include staff and staff time. I know we're going to get that question, so just putting that out there. We are not going to ask you about sustainability of that position. That is on you as an organization to understand this is possibly one-time funding, so there's no ongoing here. But if you're looking to start a grant writer, or you're looking to start resource development position, that is expansion of your infrastructure, correct? Ongoing, hopefully those positions could continue to fund themselves. Any questions there? I know that's kind of a big one. All right. So types of applications, there are actually three. So when you start your application, you'll see there's three types of applications that you'll select from: a nonprofit application, a fiscal agent application, or a fiscal sponsor application. Nonprofit application is if you are your own standing nonprofit, you manage your own finances, your own admin, all of those things. You would just select on that. If you are a fiscal agent who is representing a nonprofit who could have their 501c3 status or not, and you do their admin and then you will choose the fiscal agent. If you would choose the fiscal sponsor, if you're a 501c3 that is representing what is called small community-based groups, you'll see SCBG listed a lot throughout this webinar. You can have multiple SCBGs in one application under one fiscal sponsor. None of those organizations can have their 501c3, and they would apply as a collective. There can be a 10% admin fee for fiscal agents and fiscal sponsors that stays within the total budget. It cannot, adding that 10% cannot exceed the 100,000 or 30%. If you have questions, or you think you're going to need a fiscal agent, or you think you're going to need a fiscal sponsor, please contact us as soon as possible, because there is a process to get those kinds of things put in place. So now on to the actual application content. So talking about the nonprofit application, every application starts off with your contact information, basic things like that. You will have to have your UEI number. This is from sam.gov. If you have not yet applied for your UEI number, you can select that it's pending, and you can upload proof of it being processed, but you will have to have that before a contract can be executed. There will be a video that's coming out. We're working with DOLA and some marketers to develop on how to get your UEI number. So if you need assistance with that information video should be coming out soon. So this is what the contact page will look like for fiscal agent and fiscal sponsors. It's got a little more information required than if you were a nonprofit. And this is just to verify that you do have agreements that meet the requirements of the application for being a fiscal agent or fiscal sponsor. This includes receiving the grant, basic admin, oversight of funds, reporting, things like that. And this is where the fiscal agent or fiscal sponsor would agree and say that, yes, we are capable of doing all of these things for the applying organization. So insurance requirements. These are DOLA's required insurance needs. You must have these required insurance limits prior to executing the full contract. The only one here that they will give you a special waiver on is the automobile liability, excuse me. And that is because if you don't have anyone driving for your agency, or you don't have a vehicle, then they're not going to require you to have that liability, but you would have to provide proof of not having those things. Luckily, all of these liability limits are actually 50% less than what DOLA was originally requiring. So we were able to get it down quite a bit. But if you are going to have issues or questions about these insurance limits, we have been working to create a list of insurance agents that can help nonprofits find these types of policies. So please don't hesitate to reach out there. And the NPO, the fiscal agent, and the sponsors are required to have this insurance level. So eligibility questions. This is going to be on the application. Again, we're going through what's actually on the actual applications. It says operating budget for your current fiscal year. Again, that's what you're running in, and showing that you are between that 150,000 and the 2 million. Your main office location, good standing, mission statement, and describe the services you provide to your community. Nothing out of the ordinary, all pretty standard. There are word limits, and on the application, you will see it'll say in tiny little parentheses how many word limits you have. Fiscal agent applications. So, you are filling this information out for the nonprofit you are representing. So all of this same information for the eligibility, it is for that nonprofit. Now for fiscal sponsor applications, because you can apply for multiple SCBGs in one application, you have to fill out this information for every SCBG that you are representing. This will, if for some reason you have more than 5 in one application, please contact me beforehand so we can make sure that the application will let you continue to put in more information and more information and more information. So COVID-19 impact is a requirement of the grant. This section supports how your organization was impacted by COVID-19. You must provide supporting documentation. The supporting documentation can include and is absolutely not limited to year-over-year budgets, board meeting minutes indicating discussion or vote, notes from board or the finance committee, email documentation, a signed letter from the board chair. There's a lot of options here. If you think you have some sort of documentation that doesn't fit within this list, but you think it represents, absolutely reach out to me or Diego and we can talk through it. There is a link in the header that shows the qualifying regions for question number 1. If you're going to go through question number 1 as your COVID impact validation, then you have to use the map that is on that link. And so referring back to that, here is the 6 questions that you will see for qualifying COVID impact. The first was you were disproportionately impacted based off of your region. Again, you have to use the map that is provided in the application. Second is organization's total operating budget was decreased. You will have to provide the percent that your operating budget was decreased. You had to lay off staff. You will have to provide the percentage of staff that was decreased, laid off. Had to close for a period of time. You will have to provide the dates of closure. Or you had to access your financial reserves. You will have to provide the percentage of how much financial reserves you had to access. If for some reason you do not fit in any of these 1 through 5 categories, then you do have the opportunity to explain in further detail 250 word limits, and you do have to provide documentation showing that impact still, to say, hey, we were still impacted, we just don't fit in one of these categories. Any questions there? All right, we are chugging right along. So program information questions, all applications will see this. When you are in the program information questions, as a nonprofit, obviously you're just a single application applying for information about your nonprofit. The fiscal agent will put in the information for the nonprofit they're applying for. Fiscal sponsors, if you have more than one SCBG applying in the application, this part you are putting a collective information together in. So this is talking about all the organizations in one. So these are part of the actual numbered scored part of the scoring rubric. And each one has different amount of points that go along with things. So indicate which of the following communities the organization or groups served, provided by the number of staff, board. All these things are lined out. It's pretty simple, straightforward. So again, same thing. If you are applying as a fiscal sponsor, this is a collective answer. Wrong way. So then funding categories that you are applying for, you're going to select all of them, not just one. Make your application as comprehensive as possible. So you are checking off all the boxes. That is going to help show that you are in line with the focus of this funding source. So required uploads, there are a bunch that are needed. So if you are, for your operating budget, the nonprofit applications, you're uploading your own operating budget. Fiscal sponsors and fiscal agents are uploading the budgets of those that they are applying for. So you're not sending in the fiscal agent's budget, and you're not sending in the fiscal sponsor's budget, you're sending in the agency's budgets that you're applying for. Certificate of good standing. The nonprofit, the fiscal agent, and the fiscal sponsors have to have the certificate of good standing. And then COVID-19 impact documentation. Same thing as the first one. Nonprofits, you're putting in your own information. Fiscal agents and fiscal sponsors, you're putting in documentation for those who you are applying for. So this is just some tips and feedback that I would say could help you with your applications. So information to make sure you're including, address how you are serving the prioritized communities. Make sure you're using the language that they've been underrepresented, underserved, those kinds of things. Historically under-resourced, that's going to really hone in on the focus of this application. And then that you're culturally responsive in your programs, and that you're using your data and how you're using that data. Address how the funding request is related to your organization's infrastructure and how the funding will build your capacity. Showing that, hey, if we get X amount of dollars, we're going to bring on this grant writer, and they're going to go and get us more funding for our youth who are in the low income areas and this and that. Like, tie it all back together. If you can say this is capacity, which leads to supporting the LGBT community, which then increases their success in life, stepping that up, all kind of, very standard things that I'm sure all of those of you who write grants for a living are used to doing anyways. Include data and stories that are gathered, how this information informs or directs your actions, and the leadership and community impacts that it has. And then include your outreach and training that you've offered, completed for your board, staff, community, to ensure that you're showing cultural responsiveness. So any questions about the application, things that are helpful for the application, tips, tricks, anything like that before we kind of move on? All right, that's either I'm doing a really good job or we'll have a lot of questions afterwards. So yeah, go ahead. Is that
Vashti? Thank
okay,
you.
Yeah.
I don't know if I should probably ask you questions kind of on the side, but we may be able to, is it possible to ask for funding for our nonprofit that is already registered agent, et cetera, and be a fiscal sponsor for others in the area?
Ooh, that is a new question that I have not actually heard.
Our nonprofit has been an umbrella organization since kind of the late 70s, and helped other nonprofits in the community do projects like that. And I was just wondering if it's possible that we could do capacity.
To have two separate.
And or
let me take that up to DOLA to confirm. My assumption would be that they would actually just say it all needs to be one. Okay. Because both awards would actually be to your agency. And I don't think they would say an agency can have two separate awards. But I will take that up to them and then get back to you. If you want to shoot your email address into the chat, and then that way I can get back with you.
Sure. Thank you so much.
Yeah, great question. All right, so just some other information regarding the grant process. So this is not a reimbursable grant, but you will still have to show your receipts for approved expenses. So what'll happen is upfront, after contracts are signed and awarded, if you're awarded, you will get 50% of the funding right away. Then following that funding, you must show that you've spent all of that funding on eligible expenses and provide your quarterly reporting and everything like that. Once you've shown that all those expenses have been spent with approved receipts and fund expenses, then we can administer the other 50% of the grant. Following the expenses of all of those, that you just have to prove and send that information in, so that way we can get all the reporting into DOLA that we will need to get done. Any questions there? So it's not reimbursed, but it is, you still do have to provide backup documentation for all expenses for the funding. Okay. For the review of the actual applications, UWPC will have a review committee that we are going to be representing across all 5 regions. That way we have adequate representation across the regions that we are serving. And that is going to, they will meet and review and use the scoring rubric. The scoring rubric is on our NPI website, on United Way's website. You can use that to show, like, see what one score for points versus a yes and no question, all of those things. It's a useful tool, I would think, for me to see what I'm being scored against and where they're looking at points and things like that. There is 10% admin fee can be applied as part of your budget. It cannot, again, exceed the total of, like, the max allowed budget. So if you're asking for $100,000, $10,000 of that can be admin, but no more. And then technical assistance. We will be providing technical assistance through the very end of the grant till the last penny is spent down. So DOLA even said it the other day. They told me, they're like, this is the first time this funding's ever happened. This is the first time we're doing all of this. We're going to provide as much support as we can because we want to make sure that everyone is successful. These funds are guaranteed now that they've come through United Way. They're guaranteed for our region, which is super cool. It's not very common that we can say there is guaranteed money coming to these counties. And we can say that right now. So please make sure, if you've got anyone who's might be eligible, might be interested, share this information with them, because the more money we can bring to our communities, the more success our communities are going to see. And that is super impactful. This is not a super competitive. This is, let's get money out and let's get people supported here. Then just basic resources. This is our website, our NPI website, the pueblounitedway.org/NPI grant. Fairly simple. You can access all the documents we've talked about here. There's sample applications, there's sample rubrics, there's an FAQ. We will post this webinar up there. We will post the PowerPoint up there, all sorts of resources, a lot of just basic questions. There's even if you're not sure that if you're eligible or not, there's a flow chart that you can go through that says, am I eligible here? Yes, move forward. A lot of great things there. And then when the UEI video comes out, I'll also be posting that up there.
Looks like we have sorry to interrupt, but it looks like we have a couple of questions regarding a few scenarios here.
Okay. All right, let's see. We have some questions. Sorry.
I can read them out. Gina asks, can you give an example of a scenario where a fiscal sponsor would present a case to work with multiple small community-based groups?
Yeah, absolutely. So because the budget for the grant is going based off of the small community-based groups, you say you had an agency who helped children with after-school programs, and then you had another agency who helped transport children to after-school programs. They were different agencies, but they both had fairly small budgets. You could have them collectively put in an application that says, hey, together our budget meets the budget requirements, And then we're each doing work that focuses on child and education, children and education. And we're going to use the budget for small community-based group A is taking 10,000 of it to expand on the facilities to make them so that they're larger. And then community-based group is going to get a secondary bus so they can transport additional kids. So they could be under one roof, one umbrella, one application, but they would get their own money from the singular application. It is important to note that if you do have a group of agencies that want to work together, if one agency, if their focus, if what they're doing doesn't get approved, the whole application fails. So that is important to note, that like if for some reason the buses don't get approved, but the building did, unfortunately the building wouldn't get any funding. So did that answer your question, Gina?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, of course. What's the next question, Diego?
Deborah asked, it's pretty similar to this one, to the question you just answered actually, but she asked, can a small 501c3 organization that has a budget of less than 150,000 partner with the COG, who is currently acting as the fiscal administrator of a federal grant awarded to this small 501c3?
Organization that has a budget. Yes. So yes, so they would have to, now if you were working, okay, wait, so are you saying that they would be your fiscal agent then, Deborah? Because if they're your fiscal agent, your budget still has to meet the 150. So if you work, you'd have to operate. No, actually.
No,
This
we
is-
have nothing near that. We, I represent a scenic byway, and there has not been any funding for scenic highways for 12 years. And it just came out about a year ago that they started funding again. But we pretty much just operate hand to mouth. The communities collectively help us out, but the budget is very small. So that's where we're at.
Deborah, why don't you put your email in the chat and let me touch base with you on your budget and a little bit more detail here, because I might have an idea, but I think it needs to be a more detailed conversation.
Great, thank you. I'll do
Yeah,
that.
of course. Do you have a next question?
Yeah, then we had a follow-up question from Gina. Newer organizations who aren't able to document COVID-19 impact, are they eligible to apply?
If you can't document COVID-19 impact, then unfortunately, no. That is one of the requirements in the House bill that is part of this. Now, there is, if we look at were services, or were you already kind of doing services, but then you had to really amp up and become a full force agency because of the need, because of COVID, you can start making arguments there. That would be where that we don't fit in category 1 through 5 would come into play. But unfortunately, it is a requirement.
This is Gina. So a follow-up question to that, or to see if I'm understanding, if a population that is being served can document COVID-19 impact, but the organization that's serving them is newer, so the organization itself can't document that impact, but they can make the case that their population has been affected. Does that work?
There was another agency had a very similar question with another rep. And when we have weekly meetings as reps to discuss these situations. So if the agency wasn't in existence during COVID at all, like at all, like if they started services because like during COVID, then you can possibly, but if it was after the COVID emergency status was gone, then no. So does that make sense? That's one of those really gray areas where the more details I have, maybe the easier I could say, but it's gonna be right on the edge of no, unfortunately.
Okay. Thank you. We'll follow up privately if we need to.
Yeah, absolutely. Please do. Like I said, like everyone's got such a unique situation, and we really want to get as many people applying for and trying to take advantage of this funding as possible. So we are absolutely here to talk through things, email through things, whatever you may need, because it is really, really important that we make sure that all of our communities, because we are trying to make an impact on people who haven't had the support and this type of support. Infrastructure capacity building is huge. That doesn't come around very often. And so let's see what we can do and absolutely talk through things.
Thank you.
We have a couple new questions coming in. These look all to be pretty general. The impact of COVID was positive for the nonprofit I run. Can the impact of the nonprofit be positive for eligibility?
So I would take a look at that map and see if you fall within that map. That's going to be your easiest way to I think for our counties, to be honest, to fall into the COVID impact. I would start there. I would suggest that everybody starts there. When you say it was positive, I mean, I'm assuming because we saw COVID dollars, we saw, influx because we got COVID dollars, we will increase staff, but you can make the impact statement through that 250 words. But you do have to show impact in some form.
Okay, thank you. I'm the one who asked that question. And it was because of the awareness of the importance of local food chains and supporting our local food producers that we were able to continue growing through COVID, just because people wanted to support this in their communities. And that is my narrative, or at least part of it. But it actually turned out to be a positive impact, because I had more people join, more people contributing than might have been expected otherwise. So it does sound odd that the impact of COVID on Soil Santa Cristo was a positive one.
Yeah, and I would take a look at that map, because that's just going to be, again, that's going to be the easiest time. You can click it and say, yes, our main office is right here on the map. But then breaking it down of, we had an increase in need, blah, blah, blah. The community did step up, but there was an increase because COVID brought all these things about. That 250 words is a lot when you start breaking that down. So you'll be able to get that figured out, I think. All right, next question. Is there any more questions, Diego?
Yeah, we have a couple more here. Michelle Hill asks, does health equity include behavioral health?
Yes, from my understanding, it does. I will double check that, and I will send you an email to double confirm with you. But my understanding is yes, but I haven't gotten that direct question yet, so let me double check.
And then Pauline asks, what is the time frame for the COVID-19 emergency status?
It is the time frame of the public health emergency state. Is that what it's called? State, the federal, where we are actually in the public health. I don't have the specific dates on hand, but I bet it is. Shoot. Yes, I can't find it, but I will get that on the FAQs.
Asks, how are funds across the state being distributed?
So the entire award, I'm gonna stop sharing real quick so I can share a different screen. So there are $33 million that can go out across the state. As of right now, each RAP has received a small portion of that. However, what we've been given to administer is not everything we can administer. So I can go back to DOLA with all of my application recommendations, my award recommendations, and say, I have X amount, it is X amount over the award that we received. And we can get up to that amount. We are not limited. So right now, there's less than a quarter of it actually distributed to the RAPs. They did that on purpose to see where the money was actually needed, so it wasn't all pre-allocated across the state. So again, the more applications we can get in, the more money we can get to our region, which is super important. So please share. Does that answer any more questions?
Looks like we're good for now.
All right, so the scoring rubric, again, it's available. It is on the website, and there is an English and Spanish version. There's also English and Spanish versions of all of our applications as well, if that is needed. We also have additional translation services for other languages that we can work with if you are going to need that, or you know an agency that is going to need that. There's a total of 30 points available on the scoring rubric. However, not everything on the application is scored via a point system. Some of them are yes or no, and some of them are a narrative where the reviewers will have their opportunity to just read and score from there. So let me share this screen with everyone. So start now, start working on your applications if you can. Get your UEI number if you do not already have one. It does take a few weeks to get, so you can continue on in the application without it as long as you put the pending information. Not sure if your application qualifies, please just email us at grants@pueblounitedway.org. We can talk through it via email. We can talk through it over the phone. Let's start via email. I think that's always the best, because then you have something that you can track back on as well. If you're going to make sure that you know all what the required documents you're going to need are, start tracking those down. If for some reason you need to get your board approved budget, if you're in a new fiscal year and it's not a board approved yet, working through those things. And then check out our NPI website. It has a lot of information, a lot of resources. Utilize our technical assistance, and then also take a look at your own insurance, so that if you are awarded, you're aware of what you may need to get if you don't going to meet those insurance requirements. And if you think you're going to need a fiscal agent or fiscal sponsor, talk to us now so we can talk through that and figure out a solution for you. And that is all I have. Any more questions? Happy to talk through things. So we will post the PowerPoint and the webinar on the website. It'll be at the Pueblo United website, .org/NPI grant. You guys can reach us, and yeah, if there's no more questions, we're going to go ahead and give you all a few extra minutes in your day. All right. Well, thank you all. And again, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out, and you all have a great afternoon.
Bye, everybody.
Courtney, thanks, Diego.